Hello, listeners and fellow book lovers. Welcome to The Book Snug, a bi-weekly conversational podcast about books and the reading life. My name is Stephanie.
And I'm Julia.
We're a mother and a daughter who love reading and talking about books, the ones we adore and the ones we don't. We're delighted you're here, so grab your favorite hot drink or ice-cold beverage and settle in for another cozy, bookish chat.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Julia.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
I'm happy to be here in the Book Snug. I want to talk about some good books.
Yes, I'm very excited for this episode.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I've been reading so many good books, and you have that we actually had to do a good book episode before we actually did our quarterly review.
I think this episode is going to be just chock full of good stuff, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear about your books.
Yes. Well, hi, friends.
Hi, friends.
Listeners. If you guys are new to this show, this little cozy, sometimes chaotic corner of the world,
yes,
we like to take a pause every quarter to kind of talk about how we've been working on our reading goals, if we have any. Have we been achieving them? What's the status of them? But then to also share some books that have been coming up to the surface for us as some of the best we've read this quarter.
Right.
There are a couple of different categories we look at, but we'll kind of talk about those in a second.
Mm-hmm.
For now, though, I was curious if you had any thoughts on what your reading has been like this quarter so far.
It's been good. Yeah? I feel like I came out of the gate gangbusters. Mm-hmm. And read a lot of really, really good books. And only now at the end of March is my reading slowing down. Mm-hmm. Not because it's been bad reading recently. Mm-hmm. And I don't think I'm burnt out. I just have read so many good books that I feel like I need to take a breather and just kind of think about the stuff I've been reading and wait until I can't wait to pick up another book. Because I'm not really there right now. I'm kind of in this place where I don't feel any kind of particular urge to read any particular type of book. This is just how my reading life is. Yeah. I tend to not binge, but I will read a good amount of books and then realize that I'm getting just a little bit
ahead of yourself.
Or I don't want to say burnt out, but maybe it is a little bit of burnout. And so I have to wait till I get the urge to really want to pick up another book.
Sure.
It's who I am as a reader. Yeah. I go through really good spells of good reading, and then I have a dry spell, which is not a bad thing for me. I actually like some time where I'm not picking up a book. Yeah. I can go for a week or two without really doing much reading, although I almost always have an audiobook going. But for me, that's a little bit different than reading words with my eyeballs.
Right.
Did that make any sense?
It did.
I felt that was just a bunch of gobbledygook.
No, it made sense. I understood what you were saying 100%. Gobbledygook and all.
How about you? How's your reading been?
Yeah, I mean, January and February for me were good. It's a very interesting situation to have read some of the best books of the year already so early in the year.
Yeah.
I'm hesitant that means the rest of my reading isn't going to be great. Or I'm going to have a year of amazing reads, and how am I ever going to pick which one was the best of the year?
Yeah.
When we do our yearly review or whatever.
Mm-hmm. That's a good problem to have, though.
It is, and I'm thankful for it. But March has been not a crash and burn kind of month. Spring always gets me like this, where as the weather gets warmer, it's not that I'm not creative and it's not that I'm not inspired in the winter, but it's a different sort. So when the weather gets warm or it starts getting really pretty outside with all the colors, then I want to do everything. Yeah. I want to learn new skills. I want to go on picnics. I want to do everything.
Yeah.
And so my attention starts getting diverted elsewhere. And I also didn't feel great in March, and it kind of manifested in a couple of different ways. So there was a period of time where I was just not interested in anything that made me happy, which meant, and I'll talk about this in a second, one of the books that I said I was going to read this month, I'm not even 100 pages into it. Like it didn't even get started.
Yeah.
So, but I do have my pile of spring books that I do every season sitting on my floor that I'm looking at, and I am excited to get into them. I think it's just not getting myself back into the hey, I like doing this. Let's do it again.
Yeah, right. Well, it kind of sounds like you're similar.
Yeah.
You're feeling similarly to how I'm feeling. And maybe it just is that, just the start of spring and just feeling a little bit unsettled and not really sure how I want to be spending my time right now.
Yeah.
The weather's been weird. We had really warm weather. Now it got really cold, and now it's rainy, which I would expect this time of year to be rainy and chilly. But when you had a week of 70 plus degree weather, it's just really hard to go back to the normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are struggling with that right now, specifically for our area of the world, of course.
Yes. And I think the other thing too for me, and I have a very vague memory of talking about this last year too in March, of just feeling like things fell apart. So I wonder if it's just a pattern for me of like January and February, I get going really good. And then it's like building a habit. I miss a day or two, and then I'm like, what happened? And now I'm putting the pieces
all or
back
nothing
together.
mindset.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Not that I think that way about my reading, but I just get overly excited that I like have to take a pause and do a couple other things.
Right. Yeah. There's no harm in that.
No, it's a healthy reading life.
It is. Yeah. And it's also healthy not to beat yourself up about it.
Right. Yeah. And if it means that the book that I wanted to read this March I didn't get to, that's fine. I'll do it again
The book
later.
is still there.
Yeah.
And the days keep rolling by.
Yeah. Or if I'm so excited to get into my other books that reading that one is going to be a problem, I'll table it and it's not a big deal.
Come back to it some other time. I just did that to a book I've really been looking forward to. It's one of the books I mentioned in our upcoming releases that we're so excited about. But the feel of it, like the pacing of it, was so similar to a book I just read that I couldn't get into it. And I know I'm going to enjoy this story. I might as well just say it was The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden.
Okay.
But it was at least the beginning was very slow paced, very character focused. And I was having a hard time with it because it was slow paced.
Sure.
I had just read The Fox Wife by Yang Shih Chu. Loved that book, but it is a slow paced, character driven novel. And I can't do those close together.
Yeah.
I have to give myself some like fun, quick, plotty books in between.
Right.
And I haven't done that. So I had to put The Warm Hand of Ghosts aside. I'm going to read it. I'll probably read it in the next couple of weeks. I just needed a different kind of story in between.
Sure. Did you have any goals for the year that you were working on?
Yeah, we talked about those. I forget when.
Okay.
Was that when we did our like top
tie-up?
our top 5 books of 2023? Then we talked about our goals. I didn't have many.
Okay.
I wanted to read 5 classics in 2024. Haven't done that. Haven't even come anywhere near a classic. So I guess I better pick up the pace for that. I had a slow month in February, I think. And for a while, I was not even on pace to meet my reading goal for the year on Goodreads, which is 70 books. Go ahead, roll your eyes.
But also it's February.
I know. I'm just saying. I was reading pretty slowly, so I wasn't meeting it. At this point in the game, I'm 6 books ahead of where I should be.
Shocker.
So I caught up.
Yeah.
So I'm on pace for that, the 70 books. Again, I just want to stress to our listeners and to you, it's a random number. I know I can meet it without stressing or doing anything weird at the end of the year, like reading 10 novellas just to get my books in. Yeah, because I won't do that. To me, what's the point? But anyway, I'm on pace for the 70 books. And then the other thing I've just been trying to do is really, really, really whittle down my owned TBR. So books that I own in physical form as ebooks or audiobooks. I'm really trying to make those a priority. And one of the ways I'm doing that is I'm just doing one teeny tiny little reading challenge through the Book Girls Guide called In Case You Missed It, which I think I shared on another show. I forget. But the way they run it is every month corresponds to a year starting in 2012. So January was 2012, February was 2013. This month is 2014. And I just have to pick books that are published in those years.
Oh, that's easy.
For that month. Very easy. So I just go to my shelf and see what books are published when, and then pull out a book that's appropriate for the year. And that has been really helpful for me to pick up books I owned. And I have some of those on my list today that really turned out to be great reading experiences.
Yeah. And that's such a cool way to like shop your shelf.
Yes.
Too, is to just, I like challenges like that. Not that I would ever do it, but I like the structure of them because it keeps things to a degree randomized.
Right.
Like I was just thinking as you were talking about that, how it's kind of like the people who will wrap their books in parchment paper and just pull a number. Like you're reading on your shelf, but you're doing it in a way that's randomized.
Somewhat. I mean, this is somewhat randomized. Less so than the wrapping your books, but it does the same thing.
Right. But like, how do you, unless you plan in advance, if you're just going to your shelf and it's like, oh, is this one 2016? No. Is this one, like, there's kind of that degree of.
Yeah. And I do, like, it's the end of March. I already know what books I will probably pick up for April. So I do a little bit of research ahead of time. I only own two books for 2015.
Okay.
2 or 3 that I'm excited about reading. And even those, I don't know, if the mood doesn't strike, I won't read them.
Yeah.
I still haven't quite figured out my motivation for picking up a book. I am very much a mood reader. If somebody tells me, you have to read this book because I said so, I am absolutely not going to read it. I'm just not. It's who I am.
I think we've covered that
a very strong rebel streak. I don't want to be that way, but I recognize that that's part of my character, and I just have to work with it. And I've come up with many tricks to get myself to do things I don't want to do because I have to do it.
Yeah.
But being a mood reader, a strong mood reader, if I need some direction sometimes because I can't figure out what mood I'm in, and then I don't pick up any books. And this type of reading challenge gives me enough direction with still enough choice that I can do it, and I find it to be fun.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Do you have a number of how many books you've read so far?
I do. I have read 22 books so far, but and I feel like that sounds like a lot. But I generally read 7 to 8 books a month. So I guess I am on track.
Yeah.
But I have read a lot of really short books. I've read 1 novella already, a book of short essays, and 4 middle grade books, which I can zip through in a day.
Yeah.
I've also had 3 DNFs already this year.
Wow.
Last year, the entire year, I only had 3.
Which is so interesting in the context of it being a good reading year, and you've already had 3 DNFs. So that's very interesting.
Well, that could go either way, I think. It could just mean that I am not having any compunction about stopping a book if I'm not enjoying it, and that's why my reading quality feels so high. Or it could mean that I'm not being very choosy about the books I'm picking up. And so I'm finding some books that aren't necessarily working for me. It's not that I feel that they're bad. They just weren't my type of book.
Sure.
So how about you, Julia? Are you meeting your reading goals? Do you even remember what they are?
Okay, I do remember what my goals are.
I had to go back and look. I had to go back and look at our notes from the show to find out exactly what my goals were.
Mine are easy because they haven't really changed. So it's not like I'm changing my goals all of the time. So they were, I know one of them was to not buy impulse books, to be very mindful of my no-buy ban for books. And I bought 1 book on impulse, and I am going to talk about it.
Okay. I hope it wasn't a bad move.
well, we'll see. But I purchased it because I was out at Barnes & Noble with a friend. Like, we just went to hang out on an afternoon, and it was near Valentine's Day, and I wanted a romance. And I don't typically impulse buy, but I bought this one because I was looking for a romance, and I was with a friend, and it was whatever.
It appealed to you.
Yeah. So I do have to be honest and admit that I did impulsively buy a book because normally I don't. Normally I have pretty strict structures that I use to keep that from happening.
Right. So, like not browsing at Barnes & Noble if you can help it.
Or if I browse, I take a picture of what the book that I'm interested in, and then I add it to an Amazon list later.
Yeah.
And that list then I send out for my birthday or for Christmas. And then if I want to buy a book, I shop only off of that list. So like I don't go into Target and buy it like off the shelf.
Right.
Or if
you see the 30% off sticker on the book. Yeah.
Right. Or if I am at Target or I am at Barnes & Noble and I've seen this book that I've been looking at for a long, long time and it's a reasonable price, then I will consider it.
Right.
But I'm not just like, I'm not shopping at Target and, this looks interesting and putting it in my cart. Like I'm being a little bit more strict about it.
Yeah.
The second goal has been reading from my shelf, which I've mostly been doing. When we were in Florida at the beginning of the year, I did purchase some books from a bookstore. And I think I've said that before. Generally, if I'm on a vacation, book counts as a souvenir. Like, it's not like a...
Yeah. It's not an impulse purchase.
Right. And this was an independent bookstore in Sarasota. And so it's fine. Mm-hmm. But most of my reading has been from my shelf. And I don't think it's happened yet, but I have a couple of books from your shelf that I have to read yet. Yeah. But I've kept it pretty in-house. And then my third goal was I think I had mentioned that I'm using Anne Bogle's reading journal as a prompt. And my goal was to go to the library and purchase those from the library or use the library. Yeah. I haven't got my library card yet, but there is a philosophy behind this.
Okay.
And the idea was that if I am already struggling to sit down and read physical books I own, why would I put more physical books in a space that I'm not going to read? So I'm going to listen to these on audiobook.
Okay.
And I think because I have discovered, and we talked about this a little bit with Dad, that if I want to sit down and read, that's different than if I want to read while I'm putting laundry away or do something like
dishes.
That.
Yeah.
I have, for work, I have to be in Easton a couple of days coming up in April, and it's going to be,
driving back and forth. Yeah.
And so I have been looking at the books that I want to listen to during that drive to make it more enjoyable.
Yeah.
So it's been a fun way of kind of attacking this challenge.
Okay.
And my reading number is completely smaller than yours. I have about 9 books.
Okay. But that would be par for the course.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not a bigger reader, but I read more books per year than you do.
Right.
So, generally.
This is true. I mean, if I look at that in the context of the year, if it's 9.25,
yeah.
The 36,
you said you wanted to read about
40
books. That will get you there for sure.
Yeah.
And you do have some vacations coming up where you could do a lot of reading.
Right. And no doubt once I get started reading again regularly, that it's not gonna, I'll catch up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I did have a little challenge that I had set for March, and that was to read Elizabeth by Margaret George. Mm-hmm. And that's the one I'm not even 100 pages in.
Okay.
Like I'm enjoying the story. I just am not.
Yeah.
I think because of how March has played out that now I'm not interested in reading it at the moment. So.
And it's a commitment.
Yeah, it is.
And it's a certain type of historical novel. Maybe what you need is something else, a different genre.
True. Even though I know the Elizabeth story and I know a lot of the characters in it, I think it's the holding it in my hand and seeing how big it is.
Yeah.
That if I hadn't had the month I had, that maybe I'd be a little bit closer to finishing it.
Right.
So there's that.
Don't beat yourself up. No. This is just reading. Yeah. It's all fun.
I know, but there is a little bit of kicking myself that I wanted to do this and life just didn't play out in a way that I was able to achieve it.
No.
So do you have any memorable reading experiences that happened this quarter?
I do. I always say when we have somebody come on the show and recommend a book for us and we sit down and talk about it in our 3 Ps in a Pod chapters, those are always very special for me.
Yeah.
Even if I don't 100% enjoy the book, I just so much enjoy talking to our guests about the book. Yeah. The things we like, the things we didn't, the plot, the characters, the setting. It's just fun. It is fun to talk books with people.
It is. I'm very much looking forward to a book I like, so hopefully that's coming soon.
Maybe that'll be next. Who knows?
We'll see.
Yeah. I have allowed myself this year to really indulge in new releases. And I have been very focused on the releases that we talked about in our upcoming releases chapter where we I think the title was These Books Sound So Good or something. I forget. We'll put the link in the show notes. But I have read several new releases and I have enjoyed every single one. There's not a single one that I have wanted to read that has been a disappointment. So I'm pretty sure that has played a big role in my super enjoyment of the first 3 months of this year.
Yeah.
I talked about some of the books on our show when we wanted to talk about books and we knew we couldn't fit them all in this particular chapter, like Everyone on This Train is a Suspect. I read The Fox Wife by Yang Shih Chu. She narrates her own book and it's just lovely.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that reading experience. But that's a very slow, character-driven book. And if you're not into that, it's going to be a struggle. But I highly recommend it. The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. I didn't bring that to the show, but that's a new release that released in December of last year.
You didn't talk about that?
Not as a upcoming release.
Oh, because we definitely talked about that.
We did many times.
Yeah.
The Lily of Ludgate Hill. I enjoyed that. Yeah, it's just been a great new releases reading experience this year. And I have so many more that are it's just been good.
Yeah.
Really, really good. I've been enjoying it. And I'm going to bring this up later, but my nonfiction reading has just been killing it. Home runs out of the park every single time. So
nice.
Those are the good things in my reading. What about you?
I mean, I definitely agree with you with the 3 Peas in a Pod episodes. I always love those. And this last one was so fun because it was Dad.
Yeah.
And taking shots of hard liquor at 10 o'clock in the morning with you guys was a very interesting experience in retrospect. So I really enjoyed that.
That's sneaky. You first drink it and it's not too bad. And then you realize your gums are on fire.
It's bad from the start. It got all thick in no, it was not. For 10 o'clock in the morning, it was quite an experience.
Listeners, if you're new here, we are not big drinkers. We just did something very special for that show.
Yes.
Because the book was set in Iceland.
Yes.
So we wanted to do something Icelandic and we picked an Icelandic liquor. And it was, quite the experience.
But I enjoyed that. And then I also read Snow and Rose, which I talked about in the last episode, in a bubble bath as it was snowing outside. So that was very nice and cozy and wonderful.
A whole experience.
It was a whole thing, top to bottom.
Yeah.
I think there's always something really fun when I purchase a book at a place, like as a souvenir, right? And then spending the time and reading it there. So I read The 100-Year-Old Man Who Jumped Out the Window and Disappeared by didn't write it down.
Yeah, we'll have to put the author in the show notes.
We will. But I bought that in Sarasota and then I spent some time reading it while I was on that trip. So that was really fun. And then being with a friend of mine at Barnes & Noble for a snowy wintry afternoon was really fun too.
Yeah. Good times.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I feel like we have talked all over the place now and it's time to get into our books.
Yes.
As a review, the categories that we use are cream of the crop, and this is the best of the quarter so far. A sleeper hit, which was a book that was an unexpected surprise. A letdown, that was the least favorite and or most disappointing. This could also be a DNF, which I think we've put it there in the past too.
Yeah.
And then the final category is a wild card, and this is anything else that we want to talk about.
Yep.
So how are you starting us off?
With the cream of the crop.
Okay.
And I am going to talk about Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands.
Don't say too much because I want to read this.
I'm not going to do any spoilers. This is a second book in a series by Heather Fawcett. The first book is about Emily Wilde, who is an academic. She works at Cambridge. She's a professor and a researcher, very focused on fairies. And in this is a fantasy world, but it feels very much like our world. Placed in like the late 1800s, early 1900s. Yeah. And like I said, she's at Cambridge, but in this world, fairies are real. People believe in them and they study them. And Emily is especially hyper-focused on fairies. It's like her whole life.
Right.
It's her whole personality. She almost comes across as being not ADHD or maybe a little bit on the spectrum. She's not good with social situations. She's a little bit awkward.
Yeah.
And it comes into play in the first book because she's doing research in Hransvik, which is in a Scandinavian country. I don't even remember where. But she hurts the townspeople's feelings because she doesn't bother to take the time to find out their social customs and hospitality requirements. And so she kind of turns the townspeople against her.
Right.
And along comes her academic rival, Wendell Bamblebee. He steps in, he charms the townspeople, he tidies up her rental property, and then wants to work with her while she does her research. And there's a whole bunch of shenanigans that take place. You meet a lot of fairies who are not your like YA romance fairies.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
These are real
Fae.
Yeah, fae who
Big difference.
Yeah, they are not human. They
No.
don't behave in any human ways.
But they love humans.
They do, but they don't have the same human emotions or characteristics. There are courtly fae and common fae, and there's a whole bunch of little subplots in the story. There are some pretty good stakes towards the end of it. So I personally am not calling this cozy fantasy. It is fantasy. It's a certain kind of fantasy that is appealing to people who want a little bit of like romance, but more focused on what the fairy world is like as it relates to true myth and lore.
Sure.
And I just loved it. I loved Emily. I loved Wendell. I loved their relationship because they are academic rivals. Emily has some hypotheses about Wendell Bambleby that turn out to be true. And in the second installment, you see everything just continue on.
Okay.
Like their relationship is changing. They're doing more research in the field, but this time they end up in Austria.
Oh, cool.
In the Alps.
Oh, cool.
And there's a particular reason they're there. You meet all kinds of new types of fairies. There's another little town with townspeople. And it ended up being exactly what I thought it was going to be. And sometimes that is just the right reading experience.
Yeah.
So I gave it 5 stars based solely on enjoyment and met expectations. A lot of people are saying the second book is better than the first,
Which is rare.
I think it's at least equal.
Okay.
So if you love the first book,
Yeah.
you're going to love the second. I can't think of a single reason why you wouldn't.
Is she writing a third?
Yeah.
Oh.
There's at least one more book.
Oh, wow.
The way
Okay.
that this book ends, for sure, there's one more.
I also feel like that this book, now I haven't read the second one yet. I'm very excited to read the second one. But I feel like this book series even would make fabulous graphic novels.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
just fabulous. And I wonder if maybe I would read it more, or I'd be more likely to read it because of being able to visualize the Fae world.
Yes.
And Emily, just some of the situations she puts herself in, like I want to see that representation.
Yeah. She is so single-minded in what
Yeah.
she's doing that it gets her into trouble
Yeah.
sometimes because she doesn't think through fully the consequences
Right.
or the peril that she's putting
Right.
herself in.
She almost reminds me of, and I can't even remember for the life of me her name, but the main character lead in Half a Soul,
Yes.
whatever her name is, and I can't remember.
I can't either, but I know what you're
but
saying.
very kind of oops.
Yes.
Didn't
Yeah,
pay
right.
attention.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
almost like Emily doesn't have the emotional side of herself. It's there, but she's got to dig. She's got to dig to find it.
Yes.
Yeah. The book is by Olivia Atwater.
Yes.
So anyway, highly recommend Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands, but you have to read the first book first. And that is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies.
Yes.
And the naked hardcovers are just
Stunning.
so pretty and so perfect
Yeah.
for what is going on in the story.
Yeah. I mean, the first one, it's so pretty with the flowers, but you look close and there's little bones threaded in, like it's
little
just,
elf hands.
Yeah.
Fairy hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, not elf, fairy.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great.
So I want to hear what your cream of the crop
Okay.
is, Julia.
My cream of the crop is probably the best book that I've read in a very long time. And that is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alix Harrow.
Okay. Tell us about it.
Yeah, well, I have to be careful of what I would say because we have an episode coming up where we talk about fictitious lands we want to visit. And there's a land in here that I want to visit.
Okay.
So I want to be very careful about not...
Well, and you don't want to give any spoilers. So just,
Right.
Yeah, give us an
So-
overarching idea.
Yes. The story is told from the perspective of January Scholar. And she is the ward of a very rich man. I think this takes place turn of the century. It's when colonization and collectors and I keep seeing mustaches and monocles, like this kind of like time of history.
Right.
Of
English people.
Yes.
Englishmen.
Yes. So this is an Americanized story.
Okay.
And her father works for the man that she's a ward to, collecting artifacts.
Okay.
So she doesn't see much of him growing up. January's skin tone is very interesting, and so she's treated a little bit differently. And her mother is not in the picture.
Okay.
It kind of starts with a journal and a book and a door. And next thing we know, the story takes off.
Okay.
I want to be very careful about what I say and how I say it.
Yeah.
This is a portal story.
Okay.
So
portal fantasy.
Yes.
Got it.
Specifically doors, because it's in the title.
Uh-huh.
But I will say, so I finished this book shortly before we went to the cabin earlier in March.
Yes.
And there is an old cabin on the property. And there's a section that talks about an old cabin in the book. And I just kept picturing our old cabin. And it's a very dangerous place to kind of walk around because it's still very standing and on the land. So I don't really travel around it too much. But as we were there and driving past it on the four-wheeler, I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, is there a door there? Is there a door? I want to go find the door. Because there's a door in the counterpart in the story.
Yeah.
Where Inkheart is, people are born with the ability to read stories out loud and bring characters to life.
Yes.
This story kind of focuses on a group of people who have the ability to write stories to life.
Okay.
And the idea of crossing worlds to find the people you love.
Okay.
Fabulous story. The writing was intoxicating. The way that Alix Harrow writes is it's very magical but poignant. It's told from first person, so it's very reflective, and yet it's a little quirky at times. She's writing about like, how did you see that capital letter? That means this is important. Like telling it from like January's perspective. There's some level of is it an epistolary, like written in the form of letters?
Oh yeah, epistolary.
Yeah. So that's in there. Magic. It's just a fabulous
wonderful.
fantasy.
I own that book.
You need to read
e-book.
it.
Okay.
Yes.
I will move it to the tippy top.
Yes. Oh, it's so good.
Do you think it was published in 2015?
I think it's 19.
I'm just joking.
Yes. No, 19. But I know that Nana read it and really enjoyed it.
Yes, she did.
Yeah. It totally fit what I was looking for in a good fantasy. Something that was easy to read, that had characters that I liked.
Took you someplace new.
Yeah, lots of new places.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it sets up like it could be the beginning of a series, and I hope it's not. Like it ends in a way where you could see it continuing, and I'd love to continue with the characters, but I hope it just stays a single story.
I like that when a book just ends and is perfect that way.
Yeah. So that was my cream of the crop.
Sounds good.
Yes, it was a good one. What is your sleeper?
My sleeper hit or my happy surprise probably could have been cream of the crop as well. I had several that were about the same as far as my enjoyment level of them.
Yeah.
This is Life After Life by Kate Atkinson.
Okay.
I read this for my In Case You Missed It reading challenge. It was published in 2013, so I read it in February. You're probably, I don't know if you're familiar with the title, but this book was big when it first came out. It got a lot of awards. It made Goodreads historical fiction book of the year. It was Waterstone's book of the year. It was the Costa Book Award for novel.
Jeez.
So, and that's just a few of the things. It's accolades and awards. It is literary fiction with a speculative element. So what you have is a complicated, beautifully written, and I can't stress that enough. The writing was just so lovely. But it's a beautifully written time loop story that focuses on our main character, whose name is Ursula. And we meet her when she's born, and we follow her through her many lives, because this is a repetition of somebody reliving their life over and over and over again. And the time frame for this is the first half of the 1900s. So from like 1911 or maybe even earlier, 1908, all the way through World War II. And then beyond when you get to her, like the end of her life, but you don't see that very often. It's an exhausting book. For me, whenever I read time loop stories where we repeat sections over and over again, it's exhausting for me. Just like The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, or Recursion by Blake Crouch. That's another one that I was just completely exhausted by the time we got done. But this is just so good, so fascinating. The whole concept of this is Ursula just keeps getting reborn so that she can do her life right. Like every time something wrong happens, she goes back to being born again.
Jeez.
And you just keep following her, and you end up following her through several different versions of what her life could be like. There are so many themes in this story to think about. Family and home are just such a central focus. Her parents, I loved her mother. I loved her dad. She has a wonderful relationship with her older sister and her one younger brother named Teddy. And it's just, I think what you come away from this book feeling is that your life is never going to be perfect, that there are always going to be good things and bad things in it. You're going to have heartbreak and joy. That is just what life is. But that's not all life is. It is about the relationships you have that carry you through. Where do you call home? What is your safe place? I loved it. I thought it was wonderful. It is a hard book to read. There is a lot of World War II, like real hard World War II stuff in here. Well, a couple of her lives are really rough because of decisions she's made, people she's met.
Sure.
So if this sounds good to you, Julia, or any of our listeners, definitely check out some of the warnings.
Okay.
Because I could see how some of this stuff could be really triggering for people. But I just thought it was wonderful, beautifully written, themes that I just love exploring and then thinking about. So 100% my kind of literary fiction.
Yeah, no, it definitely is yours and probably not mine.
Because like I said, the war aspects of it are, very, very heavy in here.
Right. And I very rarely do books about real life things. Doesn't mean it's not a stellar story, but it's very rare that I read stories like that.
Great writing, great character studies. The plot is very complicated, as you can guess.
Yeah.
Because you just keep repeating stuff and it does kind of jump all over. So it's not the type of story you can just slide through. You've got to pay attention to where you are and what's going on. But I loved it. Loved everything about it. There is a second book. It's like a companion novel that follows her younger brother, Teddy.
Oh, interesting.
It's called A God in Ruins, which I plan on reading because I just love the first one so much. Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. What's your sleeper hit?
My sleeper hit is We Are All the Same in the Dark by Julia Heaberlin.
Okay, this is like a suspense murder. Is it a mystery?
Suspense mystery. There's
Thriller?
a little bit of a thriller in there.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So I don't even know how to begin. I'm going to use.
Don't give anything away.
No, I know.
Heaven forbid.
I'm going to use this blurb. So, the discovery of a girl abandoned by the side of the road threatens to unearth the long-buried secrets of a Texas town's legendary cold case in the superb, atmospheric novel from the internationally best-selling author of The Black-Eyed Susans.
Oh, I read The Black-Eyed Susans.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's kind of gritty. Her writing is a little gritty.
I didn't find this to be nearly as gritty as The Scribe, which I talked about earlier.
Okay.
But I could see how it could be, given what the story is. So the story is always told from first person perspective, but it switches through a couple of different people.
Okay.
The story opens with Wyatt, who's the guy who finds the girl on the side of the road. And the mystery that we're kind of dumped into is Wyatt's sister, Trumanelle, goes missing when she's 17.
What a name.
I know. Trumanelle Branson is the name. So she goes missing when she's 17 and nobody knows what happened. They don't know if she's dead or if she ran away. Wyatt and Trumanelle's father was abusive, so they thought it was the father, but he went missing on the same day. So a whole thing.
Okay.
People try Wyatt in the court of public opinion and he loses. So then he becomes kind of a recluse.
Right.
That's how the story starts. Then we switch to another perspective whose name is Odette. And she is the youngest female cop in the town. And she was in the same age group as Trumanelle. So she's really focused on figuring out what's going on. And so we kind of follow her through her marriage that's falling apart, and some of the other things that are going on in the town. The writing is, normally when I hear a story is a thriller, I'm very hesitant about the writing because they can go real funky real fast. But this writing, I don't know how else to say it other than like a Southern lullaby. Like, it just kind of feels like somebody's telling you this story that's been sitting in I don't know. It just feels in magical
local,
and and musical, and it just pulls you right
like local
in.
Folklore.
Yeah. There is a massive twist in the middle of the book.
Okay.
Like one I didn't even see coming.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's how you want your twist to be.
But I read it and I was like, okay, that happened. Kept reading and I put the book down and it just got in my head and I couldn't put the book back up for a couple of days.
Okay.
Like that kind of a, not a gross twist. I don't want to put that out there, but it was a twist I wasn't expecting.
Right. A mind bender.
Yes. Now I will say the ending, how the story resolves, was not something that I could have played along to figure out.
Yeah.
Which was a little frustrating because at one point they lay all the characters on the table and they're like, they kind of identify that the person that it isn't in the normal cast of characters. And it was just a little frustrating at that point to be like, well, then I don't know what's going on.
I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. But very, very good. Very good.
Sounds good.
I recommend.
Okay.
And the pacing was really nice. So at no point did I feel like, what's going on?
Yeah.
All of the characters are suspicious in their own right. So you go back and forth all the time. Very good.
Okay.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Yeah. What is your letdown?
My letdown is The Goblin Emperor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, by Catherine Addison.
Oh, okay.
I was really excited to read this book. There are several booktubers that I follow that love this book. And it came up for me to read because it also fit in with my In Case You Missed It reading challenge for 2014, which would have been March.
Yeah.
So I read this with my eyeballs. I did not listen to this. And it started out strong. It's about this young half elf, half goblin prince who is banished from the castle compound because the king, who is his father, had to marry his mother, who was a goblin. He didn't love her. He actually hated her. But they got married for political reasons, had a son, and he banished the queen and the prince. And then the queen died. So you have this young prince, he's 17, raised by a guardian who was banished and was abusive to him. And he finds out one day that his father and two older brothers were killed in a crash, in an accident. And he is now emperor. He has no training, no experience with court, no knowledge of how to behave, nothing.
Jeez.
And he ends up as the emperor, or they call him Serenity, at the Elven court. And what you do is you just follow him day by day as he is doing his emperor activities, going to balls and meetings and all of this. And it is truly like domestic and ruling minutia. I got to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. Maya himself, the main character, very well fleshed out, very well developed. Everybody else, completely flat. One-dimensional characters. There's a lot of telling, no showing. And I got to about the 50% mark, and I was having this weird experience with it. I never wanted to pick the book up. When I picked it up, I was fine reading it, but I was bored the entire time. And I just started feeling like I wanted to look at Goodreads to see what other people were saying. And whenever I start feeling like that, it's going to be over. A DNF for me.
Yeah.
So I was reading what the 3 and 2 star reviews were saying, and I agreed with them. So I decided to just read the last 2 chapters of the book. I did. I understood everything that happened without reading like the second 50% of the book. And I just thought, yeah, I'm done. So I skimmed a few pages, read the last 2 chapters, and put it aside. Now, I'm going to say this is not a bad book.
Sure.
And if you like court politics, if you like fantasy that focuses heavily on political maneuvering and you like fantasy that focuses on manners and fashion and that type of thing, you might really like this. But I need more than that to have a story really draw me in. Like if there, I want there to be plot, and if there's going to be intrigue, really make it intriguing. Give the side characters some personality, give me things to hold on to and really want to learn about. But I couldn't do it. I did recognize the author's skill and talent. Like I could tell that she understood how courts worked and the dynamics between people who had power and power plays and things like that. And I could tell that she loved how people dressed and that type of thing, but it just was not enough. I needed more. So I DNF'd it. I didn't even give it a rating. I just didn't feel like I could honestly do that. But I was so disappointed. I was sure I was going to love this, and I didn't.
Yeah, that sucks to hear, because it sounded like such a fun story.
Right. I thought so. And I thought Maya was just going to be a character I could really get behind. And I liked him, but I just, I don't know. I struggled to care. Yeah. And that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Probably a me thing, not a book thing, but just not for me. So that was my Debbie Downer. That was my letdown.
Yeah. That one sucks.
Yeah. What about you, Julia?
My letdown is My Rogue to Ruin by Erica Ridley.
Okay.
This is my impulse buy.
Oh, this is your romance.
Yeah.
Historical, I take it?
Regency.
Okay.
So I should have just taken that as the cue from the beginning that this is a Regency romance. And I don't ever fare well with them, because if it's not, I'm such a purist. Like, this is why I won't read Bridgerton or like watch Bridgerton, because I'm a purist about Regency.
You want the people to behave.
Yes. I want the costumes to be the way that the costumes are supposed to be.
To make sense. You want everything to make sense.
Right. Don't put modern sensibilities into
your Regency romances.
Right.
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
So I purchased this one, but going into it knowing that it was going to be a little weird and fluffy and whatever. And started reading it, and it was a really fun, quick get into reading. It didn't seem like the characters took themselves too seriously, which is always fun to read. And I noticed very early on that this was like The Bells of London, where like it's a series, it's a bunch of group of people, and each book is about a different person. But the one that I happened to be reading must have been in the middle of that, and so I felt like I was having a little bit of time catching up to it. This is the story of the Winchester family, and I didn't even write down the name. I must not have cared enough. I didn't write down the name of the love interest in my journal.
Okay.
But the Winchester family is like I don't even know what you would compare them to, but they're a family who are family by like adoption. So they're not blood at all, but they all have unique skills. So like being able to do crazy like age makeup, or to be able to train animals, or right. So they're set up in ways to help solve crimes, or to help kind of do things like that. And it sounds super fun. And the premise is that this family is given the task of figuring out who is creating forgeries of coins, and it traces them to a notorious crime den. And the person that's creating these fake coins, he's doing so because he's held under duress.
Because he's good at it, and they want him to.
He's doing it under duress because he went to leave the crime den because he was doing other things for them, and he said, "Absolutely not! You can't leave, or we're going to take your sister."
Oh, okay.
So there's stakes there,
threat,
right. And so the girl, and again, I feel awful. I don't remember her name, and I could look it up, but I just don't care.
Right. I was going to say this is indicative of how you feel about the book.
She decides, because the story is her perspective, she decides that to help her family, that she's going to offer her services to this crime den because she's an artist, and so she can use them to help create the forgeries, and at the same time find all the lost treasures that people need back.
Yeah.
And thus begins the romance between the Winchester lady and this
forger.
Yeah.
Okay.
The forger has his own story going on. At the end of the day, this was an open door romance, and it's not what I wanted.
Okay.
And it was open door in the last possible second necessary.
Oh, really? So you went through the whole story without...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when the story finished, I was like, why did they like each other? There was no like evidence of feelings for each other outside of oh my gosh, she's looking at me, or like.
So there was no true relationship development. Okay.
No, I had no sense of understanding why they liked each other. In Half a Soul, to go back to that, it's a closed door romance, but the story ends and you know why they like each other. Right. You know why they care about each other. They fit
together.
Right.
Yeah.
Or like Bringing Down the Duke, to use an open door example.
Yes.
That is very open door, but the book ends and you understand why they like each other. Absolutely. And you root for them as a couple.
Yes.
Or I'll use Lights of Prague, and I forget the author, but I've talked about it before.
Yeah.
It's not a romance story, but there is romance in it.
Yes.
And it is open door. And I know why they liked each other at the end. Or even Widow of Rose Hall, I'll use as another example.
Yeah, that's a ghost story.
Right. Yeah. Where open door, but you know why they like each other at the end of the story. This one, I was like, why? What's going on? Right. So it was just, it. I don't want to say it was a waste of time, but it reminded me why I don't read romance and why I don't read impulse buy. So it was a little frustrating that was my February romance read. But
you like to vet your books a little bit more.
Yeah. It was not good.
Yeah, romance is tricky. It's very tricky.
Right. Well, and for anybody who's listening for the first time, I am not a romance reader. So please don't take my opinions on this book as like, oh my gosh, it must be an awful read.
Yeah.
I just am very particular about the romance that I read and how I read it.
So am I. Especially with contemporary romance. I'm very, very picky about that.
Yes.
All right. Well, I'll steer clear of that book.
Yeah. The writing was also weird too. It was very repetitious at times. And I'm like, I don't understand. But it's whatever. Let's tie this up though and tell me what your wild card is.
We're really having trouble.
I know. It's the end of an evening. It's been a long day.
Can't say my words.
No.
I struggled with this hard, trying to pick a wild card. So I'm going to break the rules like I always do, fit in more books than than I'm supposed to. But my wild card is actually my nonfiction reading for the last 3 months. I have read some great nonfiction. Most of them I've listened to. Almost all of them I've listened to except one. I'm just going to list them and give like a 1-sentence summary so that this doesn't take an hour. I read as a book The Remarkable Ordinary: How to Stop, Look, and Listen to Life by Frederick Buechner. This is a series of essays that are part memoir, part investigation of faith and life and art and how they all kind of come together. This was an incredibly good book. I took tons of notes in my commonplace book from these essays. Frederick Buechner is a trained pastor, but he has never pastored a church. He only writes. He writes about faith and how faith intersects like experiences in your life.
Sure.
So that's the first book. The second book that I listened to was The Sun Does Shine: How I Found Life and Freedom on Death Row by Anthony Ray Hinton. This is about a man who was wrongly arrested and convicted of murder. He's a black man living in Alabama. Blatantly obvious that he was innocent and he was still sent to death row. Spent 30 years there. 15 of those years, people were trying to get him freed. And he eventually acquired Bryan Stevenson. Do you know who he is? Just Mercy. He wrote Just Mercy. He is a lawyer. He works tirelessly on behalf of people who have been wrongly accused, probably more specifically for African Americans, but I'm not going to say that's true.
Sure.
But this was just such an infuriating, maddening read, and yet so full of hope. Anthony is just so vocal about his faith in God, his love for his mom. He had a best friend who visited him every week in prison for 30 years. So this was just an incredible read. Impacted how I view capital punishment, our judicial system. I mean, it was just, I highly, highly recommend it. I read it for Black History Month. Then I listened to When Books Went to War: The Stories That Helped U.S. Win World War II by Molly Guptill Manning. This does a lot in this. This is a short book, like 6 hours, but the main focus is on how the United States developed and sent tons of books to soldiers while they were in training, and then also over in Europe and in the Pacific. The books were called ASEs, or Armed Services Editions. They were designed specifically to fit in soldiers' pockets. They were lightweight but durable. And my favorite part of this book was hearing from the soldiers. They wrote letters back about how these books impacted them during the war. It was just, I just loved every minute of it. And what I especially loved is one of the books that the soldiers just requested over and over again was A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. And that is just such a lovely book. And I'm so glad that soldiers really found that helpful. So I love that. That was a great book to listen to. And then finally, Julia, I listened to a book by somebody that you have read before, by Caitlin Dowdy. It's called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Other Lessons from the Crematory. This is a memoir.
Yes.
About her first 6 years or so working in a crematory and determining that she wanted her life's profession to be involved in the funerary services, specifically cremation and natural. She doesn't call it natural death, but it's something like that, where you don't cremate the bodies and you also don't embalm them. No. You just let them naturally decompose. I found this very interesting. It kind of reaffirmed how I would like my body to be handled when I die. It's funny. She's funny. She's a great writer. Yes. She's very open about her philosophy. She is not a Christian. No. She's, I'd say, agnostic, probably atheist.
Yeah.
So you have to go into that book knowing that some of her perspectives are going to be different than yours if you are a Christian or a Muslim or anyone who has a religion. But it was just a good book. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed her perspective and her story.
Yeah. I have read From Here to Eternity, her examination of death and funeral practices from around the world.
Right.
And that one was very fascinating because looking at how Western cultures perceive death and talk about death and respect and or not respect death versus other cultures around the world.
Or denial. That's the other thing.
Right. Yeah. Just had such an influence on my understanding of how I want to process death and how I hope my death gets processed at some point, which is so morbid to be talking about, but I think it's an important conversation. Yeah. And Smoke Gets in Your Eyes is definitely one of the books from her that I'm very interested in reading.
It was good. I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah. I think it's a much bigger conversation too that I enjoy having, but I think it's a conversation that culturally I think we need to be having more too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So those were my 4 nonfiction books that I've read over the last 3 months that I really, really enjoyed. Highly recommend every single one of them.
They sound good. The what was it? The Sun Does Shine.
Yes.
That sounds very hard. And I can't imagine having that much of my life.
I just kept thinking of Joseph in
that's
Exodus,
a good one.
where his brothers sold him into slavery and he ended up in prison.
I
thought about him a lot. Yes, but still, same types of experiences. And I also thought about Job a lot and the suffering and not understanding why and what was the purpose.
Or even the Israelites too, waiting for the promised land. I mean, 40 years and it's a little bit different, but like I can't.
Still. It's a very good book. I teared up almost immediately when I started listening, and there were numerous times throughout the book that I just, it's very emotional. I mean, you need to know that going in that it's going to be a tough read. And there were times where I thought, I can't do this. I can't read this. I want to honor this man's story, but I'm not sure I can.
Yeah.
So highly recommend all of them.
Sure.
What's your wild card, Julia?
Nonfiction must have been coming for both of us this quarter. This wild card, I feel like I need to put a lot of disclaimers in front of it.
Okay.
Because it's I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy.
Oh, yes. Okay. This has been huge.
Yes. And I grew up with Jeanette on Nickelodeon.
Yes.
So this is going to open up into a larger conversation, but I started watching Nickelodeon at the Amanda Show and finished in the middle of Victorious, which was early 20 teens.
Okay.
And so Jeanette plays Sam Puckett on iCarly, which was a show I watched quite a bit during middle school and early high school.
Yeah.
And I always thought she was so funny and just really enjoyed it. And I think it was about 2 years ago, maybe. It might have been a year. This book came out. Right.
Yeah.
And seeing some of her interviews, it just was heartbreaking to know that this character that I loved so much, or I had loved so much, that the person behind it had such a hard life, such an awful life. Her mom was undiagnosed narcissistic and probably bipolar. They all lived in a small house that was hoarded to the very top of the beams. Jeanette, the youngest, thought it was her responsibility to monitor her mom's emotions, and her mom's dream was to act. And Jeanette, in order to keep her mom happy, said yes, that she would act at like 5 or 6. So from that point on, she was thrown into the acting realm, but she didn't want to do it at all. Anytime that she said, Mom, I want to write, or Mom, I want to do something else, her mom would just start crying and burst into tears. And the story then goes into her mom helping her develop anorexia, sexually abusing her. There was bulimia at one point, some negative experiences with Dan Schneider, who was the director of iCarly, just alcohol addictions, awful things. And there's a part in the story, and I listened to it, where I could hear Jeanette like tearing up, reciting it, and just heartbreaking. There's a TV show that just came out on HBO too called Quiet on Set, which is looking at Dan Schneider, but also what was going on behind the scenes, behind some of these prime Nickelodeon shows. Yeah. And so coupling it together, it's just been making me really reflect on some of the things that were really impactful to me growing up, but then also making me really like reconsider how I filter things, but like this show that I thought was so funny, but now as an adult, not funny anymore because of the jokes in it. Yeah. Really putting things together for me about what it means for me to be an adult and the humor that I consume, and what is my part as an adult in some of these things, not personally, but like if I were to see things happening, how do I respond to that? And it's just, it was really, really good.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. Yeah. It's a hard book to read. I haven't read it yet. Yeah. But don't be too hard on yourself as a child and a consumer. You did not ask for any of that to happen.
No, and I know that I had no active part in it. I think it's just the reality of I was a consumer of something, and to know that the person behind it was having such an awful time and didn't want to be there and hated being there. It makes you reconsider things a little bit.
It certainly takes away your pleasure of watching the show. And that's only one person. You don't even know what the other people were experiencing.
So I'm watching this show, Quiet on Set, right now. And the episode I finished last night, Drake Bell from Drake and Josh, he was on the show, and he documented the fact that he was sexually abused by somebody else on the set of Drake and Josh, and laid it very clear. And it's just been opening up a lot of different things.
Your dad and I always said that we would have never let you be a child star anywhere. Yeah, we would have fought that tooth and nail, even if you wanted to do it.
Nowhere do I have the personality for any of it. But it's just been a very interesting time that I've been taking, reflecting on all of this.
Yeah. And that's good. Yeah. It's good that a book like this encourages you to do that.
Yeah, it's definitely, this book is definitely not for the faint of heart. I've been looking at reading it for a very long time now, and I just decided that if I'm going to do it, I better listen to it, and if I'm going to listen to it, it needs to be from Jeanette herself. Yeah. So the writing in it is actually really stellar. As she's writing through her life, she's speaking in present tense. So you get her thoughts when she's 7, 13, 25, instead of just looking back at like, oh, when I was this age, I thought that. So it makes the story very active and living and breathing too. What a note to end on.
Anyway, I was going to say, I'm not really sure I'm going to rush out and read that one.
No, it's one you have to do very meditatively.
Yeah. And you need to prepare yourself, I think.
Yeah.
Well, we covered a lot of books.
We did, all over the place.
Should we cover a few more? What are you reading now?
Nothing.
That's not a bad thing.
No, and part of it is part of it is, and I think this was what was the issue about Elizabeth, is Ben and I are eyeballs deep into a TV show right now, and we just want to finish it. We're in the last season, and it's just taking up all of our spare time.
What are you watching?
Fringe.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah.
With Joshua Jackson and John Noble, and loving every second of it, except this last season. But we're just like 10 episodes from it being done, and we just want to finish.
And you only have so many hours in the day, especially when you work full time.
Right.
You really have to make decisions about how you're going to spend your free time. So, yeah.
Yes. Are you reading anything?
Not really.
Oh.
I did start. I bought a newly released romance. This is a contemporary. I did see it as an upcoming release and thought, I might like that. It's called Kilt Trip. It's by Alexandra Kiley.
Okay.
The reason I bought it is it's based in Scotland, and I love Scotland.
Yeah.
And this is focused on the travel industry. So I have a feeling I'm going to travel all around Scotland. It's starting out in Edinburgh, which I love.
Yes.
We've been to Scotland. Yeah. Julia chose Scotland for her graduating from high school.
But it wasn't just my trip.
No.
It was your trip and Dad's trip too, because of everything else going on.
Right. So we went to Scotland for probably 11 or 12 days, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And we stayed in Edinburgh for a little bit, spent some time on the East Coast.
Loch Ness.
Yeah. Then we went over to the West Coast, Loch Ness, Highlands. We went to Orkney. I love every bit of Scotland.
I would go back in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
Tell me to pack my bags and I'm there. Let's do it.
So I'm hoping that this book gives me all those wonderful Scotland vibes. I'm liking the characters so far, but I only read a couple chapters and I haven't picked it back up because I'm just not reading right now.
Yeah.
And I just finished Smoke It's in Your Eyes and I can't decide what other audiobook I want to read. So I'm not really reading and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that I will pick up another book and I'm sure that I will listen to another audiobook here soon.
Yep.
Okay, readers, listeners, friends. That is the end of our quarterly review for March or January through March 2024. Lots of books. We hope that you are enjoying your reading and have been having a good reading time these last few months. We would love to hear what you're reading. Yes. So you can let us know on Instagram or on Facebook. I will post about the episode and you can just tell us what you've been reading. That would be great.
Yes.
If you have any really good recommendations that you think we should pick up, we'd love to hear that.
Please.
I want to tell you or let you know that our next episode is going to be just a fun discussion about fictional worlds or places that we would love to visit. So Julia has already given you like a sneak peek tease about what she's going to talk about. I'm hoping that we can get past like all of the normal places everybody says, and we can come up with some new and interesting places that people don't know about that would encourage them to read the books that contain these cool places. Yes. I just recently read one that I think would be fun to visit.
Fun.
So maybe I'll bring that to the show the next time.
Yeah.
As always, if you would like to, we would appreciate any rating or reviewing that you would do for us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We appreciate anything that you have to say, any feedback. Of course, we always love the 5-star ratings.
Sure, they make us happy.
And the sweet comments. We thank you for anyone who has already done that for us. But we appreciate any kind of rating or reviewing that you can do and any feedback that you can give us.
Yes. Thank
you for spending part of your day with us today. We'd love for you to join us again here in the Book Snug in the next chapter.
Bye, friends. We'd love for you to continue today's conversation with us at the BookSnug_podcast on Instagram and at the BookSnug podcast on Facebook. All of our episodes can be found wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as at our website, thebooksnugpodcast.buzzsprout.com, where show notes for every episode can be found. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at thebooksnugpodcast@gmail.com.
As C.S. Lewis, one of our favorite authors, famously said, "You can never have a cup of tea large enough or a book long enough to suit me." And we wholeheartedly agree.